All right, so today we got a little bit of an interesting activity. So a little bit of background on this. When I took over for this course back in, wow, I guess it was 2019 when I took over this course. I can't believe this is going to be my seventh year teaching the course, or sixth year teaching the course because I can't do math. Yeah, I was not really sure about what to do. Plus, I was not fully aware of what the knowledge of my students were. And so I stumbled for a couple of years trying to figure out what it is I should be teaching. What I eventually settled on with Excel is I wanted to do some things that were relevant in Excel that dealt with things that everybody already knew, but used them in combinations in ways they may not have thought about. So what we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks are things in Excel that I'm sure you're familiar with the formulas, but we're going to talk about ways to apply those formulas and apply those functions and apply those routines in methods that you haven't necessarily thought about before. One of the very first things I want to talk to you about with this is I want to talk to you about what you're going to do when you leave Truman. When you're at Truman State and you have questions about Excel, generally speaking, you can ask the instructor and they will give you guidance. I kind of came to a root conclusion when I started working in accounting. If I didn't know how to do Excel, what was I going to do? And I asked my boss. Some of my bosses were very, very kind to respond to me, and some of my bosses says, I know less about Excel than you do. So I kind of came across this one thing, and it's probably very commonplace now, but we're talking 2005 when I started public accounting, this thing called Google, okay? And I found that when we actually have this database of information that we can return or turn to answer questions became invaluable. Now, this is not necessarily just specific to Excel, but this is going to be relevant to all types of technical questions that you have when you move on your career. Like for Alteryx that we're going to be working on starting in week 7, Alteryx was partially training that I see from Alteryx company and partially me looking up stuff on Google saying, how do I do this task? And I cannot understate how important that is, that being able to be self-taught in this is going to be, because you're not going to be able to do advanced tasks by asking people to replicate it for you. Partially because you may not have individuals who will be able to teach you those advanced tasks, but partially even if they teach you, if you don't understand the nuances of it, all you're doing is replication. You're not actually performing the task yourself. So that's one of the things that we're going to focus on today is we're going to talk about, okay, what is the objective? And then you're going to have to brainstorm about how to get to that objective. Now, as a little bit of a spoiler, this activity, I've done variations of this for several years. Last year, it kind of blew up. Last year, it kind of blew up because I changed a little bit of the parameters of the formula, and it was kind of cool because I ended up having students who submitted very, very exotic assignments. I had one student that created a Minesweeper clone, another student that created a Sudoku puzzle, another one created magic squares. There's a lot of creativity involved in here, which is kind of nice because you don't necessarily get that in accounting much anymore. Okay. So how do we actually get to that point? And that actually kind of derives from the origin of this particular assignment. So I want to talk about what the objectives of the assignments are, and then we're going to talk about basically how you accomplish that. I'm not going to give you all the information up front, but I will kind of guide you along the way because, again, I legitimately think that part of the struggle of learning this is going to be what reinforces your ability to utilize these tools more effectively. So this is a puzzle that I put together for a research exercise I was working on with a McNair scholar, and I was very proud of this because I'd never done anything at this level of complexity before. And this is fairly recent. This is like a year ago. The idea being is that we're going to fill out this puzzle, and once the puzzle is complete, it will do two things. First of all, it will highlight all in green, which I recognize that if you're colorblind, it really doesn't help. That's an accessibility issue that I have to address. So I have had a few colorblind students. But the more important thing is that once the highlight comes down, that it unlocks a second puzzle. All right. So there are a few basics that I wanted to make sure that I have in place. So we're going to talk about the basics, and then we're going to talk about the challenging stuff. So the first thing is we got to protect the worksheet. So for all of my worksheet puzzles that I do like this, I've got some very basic routines that I go through protection. And these are ones that you probably should be familiar with. The first one, if you downloaded the assignment or the example file that's on Brightspace, you notice this one, password protection for the worksheet, okay? The second one is going to be workbook protection. We don't want changes to the workbook as a whole. And the third one is going to be the worksheet protection itself. Now, the good news is all three of these can be found in the same place in Excel. If you go to File, Info, you can see there's a Protect Workbook tab, and you can see that all three of these are right next to each other. You can actually set those up. So these are going to be what you would use for those particular items. If you wanted to protect your worksheet, if you wanted to password protect it, if you wanted to protect structure, you want to protect the sheet themselves. All right, that's not particularly difficult. That's something that you're probably somewhat familiar with already. If you're not familiar, it's not particularly difficult to comprehend. There are some nuances to that I do want to talk about. So I don't talk specifically about protecting the worksheet, okay? So whenever I create a worksheet, one of the things that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create a worksheet that cannot the content of the worksheet cannot be adapted or altered, but other parts of the worksheet can be. So if I click on this right here, you can see the cell. If I tried to delete this, Excel comes back and says, no, you can't do that. That's protected. But if I go over to where the inputs are, if I go over to where the inputs are going to be right here, so caps lock here, COMPOUNDING. I've actually unlocked those cell references so they can be accessed. So that's an important feature that we need to talk about, because this is kind of defeats the purpose of puzzles if they can be manipulated or if they can't be manipulated. Conversely, they do need to have some manipulation available, but not all of them. So how do we go about doing that? Let's just go ahead and talk about that real quick. I'm going to create a blank workbook. So let's say that I'm going to zoom in. I want to make this cell right here, the highlighted B2 cell, one that I can put inputs into, but everything else is going to be locked out. Okay. What would be the easiest way to approach that? Well, if I go and I lock the worksheet, and let's go ahead and just protect the current sheet. And I'm just going to use a very basic password. I'm going to type in 123, which, by the way, never use 123 as your password. It is not a dynamic password. And I know I shouldn't have to say that to this group, but the problem is that people have used 123 as their password, or 1234, not necessarily at Truman, but in real life. We're going to actually talk about some cybersecurity examples later in the semester, where you'd say that can't possibly be the password they used, and it absolutely was the password. I think one was an example of chicken one for a chicken farming co-op. Okay, so 123, just because I'm going to delete this once we're done, so I don't care what the whether it's dynamic. If you want to hack this worksheet, go right ahead. Okay. All right, so we protect the structure of the workbook, and now I can't enter anything in this cell. Problem is, I can't enter anything in this cell either, which defeats the purpose. So let's go ahead and unlock the workbook structure. We do need to do something so that we can actually fix this. And the easy way to go about this, the way that I do this, is I'm going to go to right click. I'm going to format cells. And on protection, you will notice that it currently has locked hidden. That means when you lock the worksheet, it will lock that cell as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on that one, just for that cell, not for the entire set of cells, but just for that cell. Then we're going to try to re-enable what we just did. Again, with my dynamic password, dynamic and sarcasm. And now I can enter information here, but I can't enter information there. So pretty simple fix, So that's going to be our first step, wear protection. But there's a few other things. One of these I'm not going to reveal to you until probably closer to the end of today's class period. This is one of those things that I want you to try to figure out your own. But I do want to think about some other things that'll be related to this. So as you can see, the way this is set up is that I've eliminated inputs in all but certain areas, and you can actually figure out how I set this inputs up. Like just these cells right here, I highlighted all these cells that have got bracket or that got boxes around them, and say these are the only cells that I want inputs to go into. And so if we put all these in, something else is going to happen. So I'm just going to type these in. I'm sure you probably know all these these details. You're fifth year accounting student, so when I ask what a future value is, you probably can figure that out. You probably know the concepts of risks and return. And here we go. Voila, isn't that amazing? So this is kind of one of the things that I want you to note. So first of all, you notice it turned green when I got that last letter in. Then if I eliminate that K on risk, it goes back to being just white. That's kind of a signal that you got everything correct. Plus, now we have puzzle 2. Now, just for context, where did puzzle 2 come from? If I eliminate anything there, and by the way, just so you know, the trigger is not on a single area. You can actually toy around with this. Any of these letters that I delete, like if I delete it, come on, why is this not clicking? If I delete any of these letters, the same thing will happen. There's a conditional situation where everything has to be in place correctly. And it has to be correct too. So again, you'll notice I'm deleting that. So what if I just put something in there? What if I put nurture instead of future? That still won't work. It actually has to be exactly correct. Is everybody super impressed? It's like, are you not entertained? All right. So how did that happen? How did that work? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to walk through this step by step and kind of give you some clues as to how I set this up. Now, this is going to be relevant because like I do the same thing down here. I've actually got drop-down menus, and this is investment ordering is kind of the policy. And this once this big fixes, then this is going to puzzle is going to unlock as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and type this in. I think it's 4, 5, 1, 3, 2. All right. And you'll notice there that those all turn green, and now another puzzle comes up. We're not going to do the last puzzle because there's nothing exciting after the last puzzle. Plus, it requires us to do future and present value calculations, will take a while. What we're concerned about is how do we set this up so that when a certain result is achieved, that we can actually create the highlight on the cells, and we can unlock other things in the other cells. So the first answer is probably pretty easy. So here's the workbook. This is, by the way, this is on Brightspace. So if you have not downloaded this, I recommend you download so you can work along with me and see what's going on. Yes.
Where is it?
It's on the Excel 1 assignment. It's attached to the assignment as an example. So, oh, okay. Sorry, I meant that one. Okay, my apologies. Okay, so this one's not on there. Okay, that's okay because this one provides less. So I got confused as to which one's attached. So you can kind of refer to that one as there, but this one's more of a reference guide, and I'll leave this up. All right. So as you probably guessed, the highlights that occurred, those are conditional formatting. And I'm sure everybody's dealt with conditional formatting before. I know you have because we did conditional formatting back in AIS as part of Excel Friday, which we're going to be doing Excel Friday today in my AIS class. So how does a conditional formatting work? And the answer is if part of a term or a value is included, or sorry, if part of a term or an exact value is included based on parameters set up in conditional formatting, then it's going to provide a result. Now, my favorite one is the shading. There's a lot of different formats that you can set up, but cell shading is one of the ones that I think is the most straightforward. Even if you encounter accessibility issues, having no shade to a specific color shade will actually appear for most people. So let's go ahead and do a real basic one. I type in the word input. Oops, I forgot my caps lock was on. There we go, input. And it's looking for the word or part of the phrase input. And if that phrase goes in, then the conditional formatting goes place. Now, I'm assuming everybody knows how to do that. My question for you is, can I input information in one cell and conditionally format another cell? Has anybody ever tried to do that? Well, let's try it and see what happens. Oops. Look at that. That's impressive, isn't it? How did you do that, Dr. Barnes? Remember that Google search stuff I was telling you about? Yeah, here you go. Okay, so that'll be an interesting question for you to answer. Okay, an interesting question for you to answer. How do we do that? How do we set it up so that we conditionally format a separate cell via inputs on another cell? That also answers part of the question of right here. How I was able to set up a whole bunch of different cells to where the conditional formatting only triggered when all cell conditions were met. Okay. Now, here's the other one. This one's the more challenging one. This actually stems from a JBA activity that I did several years ago, because I was blanking out my cells and I was trying to hide them from. And some students figured out if they just copy and pasted it, it didn't matter that the cells or the worksheet itself was blocked out. They just copied and pasted the contents that they had access to, pasted into another worksheet that was not locked. They could see everything, all the values. So I had to get really clever with this one, and I was particularly proud of my ability to move past that. So let's go ahead and go back to some of the things that we're going to deal with. So there's going to be a set of formulas, is number search. Has anybody ever used the combination of these formulas, by the way? All right, so we're going to be learning something today. All right. So if I wanted to do conditional formatting Conditional formatting is looking for the presence of a particular value. It's not looking for that exact value. It's just looking for the presence. So if I say input MVB, put my initials, it's still going to stay still formatted, simply because it's only looking to see if input is somewhere present within the cell itself. Now, if I were to use an equal sign down here to try to do the same thing, like say I wanted to say true versus false in this cell, and I'm looking for the value input 1. Okay. I could actually set this up over here, this cell in F6, so that if it had the exact value input 1, I'd just say equals input 1, equals this cell equals input 1, it would come back true. Here's the problem. What if I put in input 1, but it's got additional information, or it's not exactly precisely input 1? So let's say I put input 1 MVB. If I do an exact equal, will it come back as a true? That's why we use isNumber search. You'll notice it did not change from true. It was still looking for that value. So basically what isNumber search is saying, I'm looking for the presence of this value anywhere within the cell. If that comes back, then it's going to come back with a value of true. And we can do this in a wide array of detail. It doesn't have to all be one value. So I'm going to put input 1 or input 2, yeah, and input 3. Now, it's important to note that these values do have to be present in some capacity, and they have to be in that sequence. So if I add just a space, because this one's looking for input 3 all together in one phrase, if I put a space, it will treat that as false. So it's not a fuzzy match, but it's looking for the presence of that piece of information somewhere in there. So why would this be relevant? So say, for example, I ask you a question, okay, who is the department chair of the business economics department? What would your answer be? Nobody knows this? Dr. Caden, yeah, Dr. Caden, okay. How many people are going to put in Dr. Caden? How many people are going to put in Stacy Caden? How many people are just going to put in Caden? So everybody see the point here? Okay, there's different variations on this. They all kind of have the same thing of Caden. So I'm going to be looking for the phrase Caden, which is why I would want to have an isNumber search rather than an equal value. Because if somebody put in Dr. Caden and you're just looking for the answer Caden, it's going to come back as wrong. So that's a very flexible option. You do have to look for a very specific piece of information. It has to be there. It is not case sensitive, by the way. So if you did capitalize K and then put AD in and then somebody typed in lowercase because they were lazy, shame on you. All right, then it would still find Caden. All right, so now we know how we can actually come up with a value and a return value. What comes up an issue is that if you look back at this spreadsheet, this was not looking for one condition. This was looking for, I can't even count that high, 20-something conditions to be met. All of these had to have a very specific value in them before everything would unlock. So how do we actually input that up there? So the hard way, the long way would basically say, let's write a nested if function that's got 20 lines. How many people want to write a nested if function of 20 lines? I'm not there with you, okay? I'm right there with you, okay? I do not want to write a long if function. I've done that in the past. I've written long if functions back before I got clever. So there is a way we can shortcut this. So let's go ahead and start with an if condition, if statement, okay? So there's a very basic if statement. You can kind of see here that I've got an if statement reached. It's like isNumber search input 1. This kind of my isNumber search is false. So I'm going to say input. And the if statement actually comes in the next one. It's saying condition is met. And it's saying if this is value of true, it's going to respond the result condition is met. If it does not have the value of true, then it's going to say the condition is not met. All right, so that's a very basic if statement. Now there's something important to note, something you may not be aware of. Does anybody see anything with the first part of this if statement that's completely contradictory to everything that you've ever learned? Look at the word true. Is anybody thinking about that saying that should be in quotation marks? But it's not in quotation marks. Is anybody confused as to why? So Excel has a dichotomous value for true and false. And those two inputs specifically, if you actually got a function that returns a value of true or false, it will look for one of those two values without the presence of quotation marks, okay? So in the example of isNumber search, it's going to return a value of true or false for the native function. This is actually true for several other equations like there. In that situation, you do not need quotation marks. In fact, if you put quotation marks it will not work. All right. So that's going to be an if statement we can write on a condition from another formula. Now, building upon this is actually pretty straightforward. We can add an account function if we want to actually have multiple conditions met simultaneously. So I've got down here input one, oops, input one, input two, and I'm going to put my initials just for context, and then, or sorry, input. I should probably put the two if I'm going to put input two. All right, and input three, and I'm going to write Caden in lowercase just to disrespect her. Okay. All right. So then we've got a countif function that's looking to see what is going on here. Do we have all of these, or how many of these conditions are met as true? And it counts as 3. If you'll notice, now I have an if function that says if this value is 3, this count function counts the number of conditions as 3, I'm going to return my condition back as being met. If it's not met, if none of these or one of these conditions is not met, if any one of these conditions is not met, then I'm going to have the value conditions are not met. And it doesn't matter which one of these situations or which one of these situations it is, it has to be all 3 conditions. Is anybody kind of figuring out what I did over here now? I've got an alternate or another worksheet that's hidden that you can't access. At least I hope you can't access it. You're going to be hacking my worksheet if that's the case. And it actually says it has to count every single one of these conditions. Every single one of these conditions has to be met in order for the unlock to occur down here. Pretty nuanced, huh? Yeah. Yes, the problem with concatenation is that it can be a little bit fuzzy at times. I've done concatenation as possible. So like basically, which seems like if I've got like a series of inputs and say it's going to look for all of those inputs, I've had situations where it's done that, but it's not done it cleanly because the concatenate function is looking for an exact match. And so like say, for example, going back, it doesn't do fuzzy matches very well is what I'm trying to say. So say for example, my answer is supposed to be Caden and somebody puts in Dr. Caden. If I actually walk through this performance or this process, I don't know why I was struggling with that word, this process, it will recognize as true all those fuzzy matches that are not necessarily being exactly correct. It just comes back with a true statement, and then I can set that up. And then it will be able to return that. Now, if I do a concatenate, it's going to pull every single exact value. Like if somebody put in Dr. Caden, it will concatenate that exact value of the concatenation. Now, if you were talking about could we concatenate all the true values and add those together, sure, that's another way to approach it. This is just the way that I've chosen to approach this particular problem. And I'm not saying that this is a one size fits all problem that this, or shouldn't say that this is the only way to approach the problem. This is the way that I chose to do it. The ultimate goal, though, is that you need to be able to capture multiple points of value simultaneously and measure whether all of them are met. And so that's kind of the goal there. All right, so is everybody thoroughly confused now as to what's going on? Good, okay, that's where I was trying to get to is there, okay. So again, going back to this activity right here, and you do have access to this one, so you can kind of see what's going on. Basically, you've got a few responsibilities. First of all, you've got to put in proper security with necessary unlock conditions. And then you've got to have a puzzle that's got to basically provide some sort of result when all conditions are met. Now, why am I saying this? Has anybody figured it out? What your assignment is for today? All right, so you're going to create an Excel workbook with a simple activity with unlock conditions, similar to the Excel one example workbook. At least one of the unlock conditions should be a change in text that takes place when certain inputs or series of inputs occurs. You also need to add standard security and protection elements to keep people from manipulating your file. This should include worksheet protection, with the exception of input cells, workbook structure, and workbook password protection. Please be sure to include all passwords with your assignment submission. It's very hard to grade when I can't actually access the Excel files. Okay. Now, as I alluded to, this does not need to be complex if you want to just try to put this together and have like one cell that has an input and a change in input. I would hope that you do more than one cell. I would like for you to do multiple cells so that multiple conditions can have to be met simultaneously. So at least 2, okay? But I encourage you to explore however you want to go in depth in this. like I said, some students last semester got really into this project. I had a Minesweeper activity, I had a Sudoku activity, had a Magic Square. They had a lot of fun with it. And those are just some of the ones off the top of my head. I know there's some other ones that were actually really cool. So you can actually go as far as you want with this one, or you can go as narrow as you want with this, depending on how much time you want to devote to it. I will say that the more time that you spend on it, the more tricks and tips you'll kind of learn as part of the activity. But it can be a little bit daunting and confusing at first. This will take some time to acclimate, but once you get rolling, it does tend to snowball. So, all right, we've got about 16 minutes left in class, so I'm going to let you go for a little bit, and then we're going to debrief at the end of class.
So that's why I haven't ever online.
All right, guys. So Clayton has said he's going to do Tetris and Excel, so there's the bar for everybody. I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Real quick, I do want to talk very quickly about so a little bit of reiteration about what I did. I've already said this. If you want to do something different, if you want to approach this from a different perspective, you are welcome to. There's no one particular. It's like that commercial. No one way to eat a Reese's. There's no one way to do a task in Excel. This is just the way that I found that works for me. But just as a quick explanation, if you're doing assignment of values, values in Excel are very easy. Okay, so I've got one here, and you see it's a true. This just equals B2 equals 1. It says it's looking for that value. You don't need to use a fancy formula. Just if you say equals that cell and that cell equals that value. By the way, you can also do this as something if you want to look at compare disparate cells to see if they have the same value. Like if I want to see if A2 equals B2, I can just say equals B2 equals A2 or A2 equals B2. Same thing holds true. I'm not sure if that'll be relevant to you, but I thought I'd go ahead and mention that. Where the input comes in, these are text inputs, and so you can't do equals because it looks for that exact item, what are exact pieces, formatting and all. So that's why we have the is number search function, so we have a little bit more dynamic inputs. The counting function was just so we could actually find when we achieve all of our conditions simultaneously. Again, there's probably a couple whatever ways to approach that. Tyler had mentioned that we could do a concatenation, and that would be something that's a possibility as well. But when the conditions are met, you get one result. When the conditions are not met, you get a different result. That's basically what I'm looking for. Okay, so all conditions have to be met for me to have audit as a result. If a condition is not met, it comes back as tax. Okay, and that's just basically that's the simplified version of how I formatted my worksheet so they would do these activities. One other thing I want to mention before we finish, if you go on to Brightspace, this assignment is technically due next Friday. All right. We do not have our next Excel assignment until a week from Friday because of Labor Day. So if you come up to next Friday and you need extra time, you're just like, Dr. Barnes, I'm really going crazy. I think I figured out how to make the Tetris shapes, but I can't get them to rotate properly. If you come into that situation, you need a little bit of extra time to flesh out your assignment. There's no worries on that. We do have 2 weeks before our next assignment. Keep in mind that for all these data analytics assignments that we're going to be doing, I use that term loosely because this is not really data analysis what we're doing this week. For all these assignments that we're going to be doing, generally there's a 1 week window. So that's something you should probably get in the habit of paying attention to. But that's it for today. Have a good weekend.